On Racial Justice Sunday, our gospel is part of Jesus' Sermon on the Plain. Jesus comes down from the mountaintop to a level place. And on the level, he looks people in the eye and he tells them truths that inspire some to hope and puts the fear of God into others. On the level, he tells people straight that their society is not as God desires. It's out of kilter. He tells them straight that some are in deep need, while others who could do something about the levelling choose not to do anything but to look to their own interests. And he says, woe belongs to them. And he tells them straight, as many a prophet in the Old Testament has said, that God's bias is to the poor and the needy. With it being Racial Justice Sunday and our reading coming from Luke's Beatitudes, I'd like to read you just a few paragraphs from a piece that was written by Archbishop Desmond Tutu in 2013. Now, it's two stories that are very well known, but actually were formative in the life of Desmond Tutu. He writes this: "One of the earliest and most painful memories of my childhood is of accompanying my father, a school principal, to the shop, and witnessing him being humiliated by a young white shop assistant, being addressed as boy by one much younger than himself, and being forced to swallow his pride. But I believe the most defining moment of my life occurred when I was about 9 years old, outside the Blind Institute at Rothenport, where my mother was a domestic worker. We were standing on the stoop when this tall white man in a black cassock and a hat swept by. I did not know that it was Trevor Huddleston. He doffed his hat to my mother in greeting. I was relatively stunned at the time, but only later came to realise the extent to which it had blown my mind that a white man would doff his hat to my mother. It was something I could never have imagined. The impossible was possible. I subsequently discovered that this was quite consistent with Trevor Huddleston's theology, that every person is of significance, of infinite value, because they were created in the image of God. Desmond Tutu wrote that in a piece called "The Man Who Changed My Life." Now, the story of the humiliation of Desmond Tutu's father by a younger man bears testimony to the realities of the racial and economic divisions of their society, a society which quite obviously was out of kilter with God's standards. And the story about the dignity afforded to Mrs. Aletta Tutu by Trevor Huddleston so inspired the young Desmond that hope was born in his heart, that he could see that there could be a more just and equitable society. It took seed. The impossible could be possible. And he grew up to become, of course, one of the great harbingers and enablers of change for the good in his society. For his part, Trevor Huddleston inspired hope in many of his pupils, not only by what he taught them, but by his attitude to other people, by the way that he treated others as children of God. He treated everybody as a valued human being made in God's image. And he became, of course, a founder member of the anti-apartheid movement, and he was vice president from 1961 to 1981, and served as president from 1981 to 1994, and remained a great support to the movement for change throughout his life. Now, these two people are from different cultures, they're different colour, with different ethnicities, one from a wealthy family and one from a poor family, but they both embodied the Beatitudes. They both were blessed. They both recognised that the society was not of God, that it was out of kilter. They both recognised that while some were in deep need, there were those who could do something about it. And those who didn't, who looked only to the status quo, well, woe to them. And they both recognised that God's bias was indeed towards those in need, and that hope led to action, to do something about it. Listen to Jesus' teaching in Luke chapter 6 and ask yourself, how do you think our current society measures up? Is it of God, or is it out of kilter? Where do you find yourself in that reading? Do you find yourself among the blessed? Or do you hear the word, woe to you? Maybe you're energised by hope, working and praying for a more level and just society. Or maybe you are happy with the status quo and say, what problems? There are no problems in our society. I finish with the words of a hymn that I came across just last week. Like the Beatitudes, it holds in vision a better society. It prays that we may never be content with the status quo until the dream becomes the reality. I have a dream, a man once said, where all is perfect peace, where men and women, black and white, stand hand in hand and all unite in freedom and in love. But in this world of bitter strife, the dream can often fade. Reality seems dark as night. We catch but glimpses of the light Christ sheds on humankind. Fierce persecution, war, and hate are raging everywhere. God calls us now to pay the price through struggles and through sacrifice of standing for the right. So dream the dreams and sing the songs, but never be content. For thoughts and words don't ease the pain. Unless there's action, all is vain. Faith proves itself in deeds. Lord, give us vision, make us strong. Help us to do your will. Don't let us rest until we see your love throughout humanity, uniting us in peace.